Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. A while ago, I made a video about this game right here, Super Bowl 13 between the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you want to learn more about that, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, to make a long story short, imagine not being able to watch the Super Bowl because the power went out right before the game and didn't come back on until right after. Well, that's exactly what happened to residents up in Idaho, where after a massive snowstorm, the power was knocked out, and just about no one in the state was able to actually watch the game. It's a shame too, because not only was it the Super Bowl, but it might have been the best Super Bowl of the 13 played so far. But at the very least, as much as this stinks, if it was gonna happen, it's better that it happened in Idaho, a place that doesn't have a team, and where most of its residents don't have too much of an affiliation to either the Cowboys or the Steelers, and not, Pittsburgh. That would absolutely stink if the power went out for a big game that the Steelers were playing, and no one was able to watch the game for some bizarre reason. Well, during this game right here, as in the 1995 AFC Championship between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Indianapolis Colts, that's exactly what happened. Because during one of the biggest games in Steeler history, and the biggest game in over a decade, everyone in one municipality right outside of Pittsburgh was completely and utterly screwed, left with no way to watch the game. And this drama goes well beyond the game itself. Amazingly enough, this rabbit hole goes even deeper than you might realize, going back nearly 2 years before the incident ever happened. Because with the Steelers and Colts playing each other this week, if you're watching as of this video getting released, this is the story behind one of the craziest broadcasting disasters in the history of the AFC Championship. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and just how far back this rivalry extends, we need some context to understand how the game was going, and obviously, its importance, so that we know why this was such a big deal in the first place. It's January 14th, 1996, and we're up at Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh for the AFC Championship between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Indianapolis Colts. The stakes for this game are simple. The winner goes on to the Super Bowl and gets to travel down to Arizona in 2 weeks to play for the World Championship. The loser goes home, with their season coming up one game short of football's biggest stage. If the Steelers win, then it would be their 5th trip to the Super Bowl, and their first since the 1979 season, all the way back at Super Bowl 14. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. If the Colts win, then not only would it be their 3rd trip to the Super Bowl, their first since 1970 at Super Bowl 5, and not only would it be their first trip since moving to Indianapolis, but it would be quite possibly the biggest upset in conference championship history. No one was giving the Colts any chance to win this one. The Steelers were double-digit favorites, and while the Steelers were viewed by many as the best team in the AFC throughout most of the season, the Colts were a 9-17, who had a plus 15 point differential, and who many viewed as a complete fluke and lucky to be there. Heck, the only reason they were even there in the first place, in the eyes of many, was because the previous week of the divisional round, Chiefs kicker Lynn Elliott couldn't hit water if he was sitting on a dock. But while this game was expected to be a blowout, and I truly mean a blowout, what we got was one of the best, and maybe the most underrated AFC Championship game ever played. The Colts actually had a 16-13 lead with 2 minutes left in the 4th quarter, but a late touchdown run by Bam Morris down by the goal line gave the Steelers a 20-16 lead. On the final play of the game, Jim Harbaugh launched a Hail Mary from 29 yards out, and by a fingertip, the Colts could not hold on, and their season came to an end just like that. Absolute heartbreak. If the Hail Mary was caught, we'd be talking about it more than 30 years later as quite possibly the greatest play in NFL history. Instead, it was just a reminder of what could have been. Despite the Steelers holding on by the skin of their teeth, at the end of the day, a win is a win, especially in the playoffs. And this meant that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to be playing at Super Bowl 30, making it to the big game for the first time in over a decade and a half. So you would think that everyone in Pittsburgh would be happy about this, right? I mean, their team just advanced to the Super Bowl, and they were now one win away from not just claiming football superiority once more, but from reclaiming their place atop the all-time throne and tying the San Francisco 49ers for the most Super Bowl titles all time. And to be fair, in most places in Pittsburgh, they were happy. If you were at the stadium, if you were downtown, or if you were in some of the surrounding suburban areas and municipalities, it was one of the most joyous moments of your life, at least from a sporting perspective. As Thomas Murphy, the mayor of Pittsburgh, said on this day, "It reminds me of the 1960 World Series. It's an exciting day for Pittsburgh. We deserve it." But there was one place nearby that was, shall we say, not as happy. There was one place that was fuming because they were completely left in the dark, unable to watch the game. Enter this town right here, Monroeville, Pennsylvania. Now, Monroeville is located about 10 miles east of Pittsburgh, and while the population has declined in recent years, back in 1995, the population was somewhere in the ballpark of 30,000 people. If you were to travel from Monroeville to downtown Pittsburgh, you're looking at a drive that, without traffic, would take you no more than 20 minutes. It is a municipality, and for all intents and purposes, it is a part of Pittsburgh in the same way that we consider Jacksonville Beach a part of Jacksonville, or Mesa a part of Phoenix, if that makes sense. It's not like this was some random town in the middle of nowhere that this happened to. This town, right next to Kennywood, is Steeler country all the way. And if you were in Monroeville, your cable provider, unfortunately, was Time Warner. I think I speak for everyone when I say that Time Warner Cable absolutely stinks. My personal experience with Time Warner and their service was nothing short of disastrous, and I don't know a single person that had a positive experience with Time Warner while they were still a thing. But if you were in Monroeville, you were stuck with them. They were a natural monopoly, like just about every cable company. So unless you had a satellite provider like DirecTV, which wouldn't make a ton of sense if you were just a Steeler fan, because you didn't need Sunday Ticket to watch your team play, seeing as every game was locally televised, you were straight out of luck. However, what's interesting about this is that tensions between Monroeville and this company right here, Time Warner, were already super high. Back in 1994, Monroeville citizens protested because Time Warner was going to, in the eyes of Monroeville, violate their agreement and add fees. If you wanted to get cable channels, on top of already paying what you were paying Time Warner, you would have to pay a rental fee of $2.99 per month, plus an extra 43 cents or so for the remote. There were a few municipalities in the area that were impacted by this, but Monroeville was the main one, and they were the ones chosen to lead the charge in this fight, because according to Marianne Now, a business manager in Monroeville, this was going to impact 97% of residents. And if you didn't pay this fee, you were going to lose all of your channels minus the basic ones. Lawyers were involved, and Monroeville spent nearly $8,000 of their own money, more than double the next closest town, and about 8 times more than most towns, to fight this off. Now, the battle between Monroeville and Time Warner itself involved months of meetings and litigation, and took nearly 2 years to decide, but just keep that in mind. Monroeville and Time Warner were already not on the best of terms. And things were about to get a heck of a lot worse. Because when the 1995 AFC Championship started, and the hometown Steelers were receiving the ball from the Colts on the opening kickoff, this happened. That's right, the power went out. It had nothing to do with weather. It was a perfectly sunny day, even if it was predictably cold with a 27-degree wind chill. It had nothing to do with high winds in the area. The winds were 13 miles per hour at kickoff, so nothing crazy. The power and the signal just inexplicably went out. According to Barbara Lukens, the general manager of the Monroeville office at Time Warner Cable, a power surge or interruption in the power supply tripped the circuit breaker that cut off cable to a couple of hundred homes in the Monroeville area. What couple hundred means is unclear. However, considering the fact that 32 million people across the country watched this game, considering the fact that the market share for this game in Pittsburgh was extremely high for obvious reasons, and considering the fact that anywhere from 97 to 98% of people in Monroeville, of which there were roughly 30,000 of them, had Time Warner Cable as their cable provider, you can bet that this was a lot of people. And a couple hundred homes probably meant, since not everyone is watching the game by themselves, a couple thousand people. A couple thousand people in Steeler territory, just like that, completely unable to watch the Steelers game. And if the reaction by this one citizen in Monroeville is anything to go off of, I'm taking a wild guess, and I'm going to say that they did not exactly handle this random power outage well. Because Bob Zonak, an accordion player and Monroeville resident who passed away 5 years ago in 2018, said on this, "I feel like going down there and dropping a bomb on the place." For what it's worth, he never committed any sort of crime and did not execute this plan to commit arson. But he was livid, and understandably so. With the power going out and the signal being shut off, it took Time Warner quite a long time to fix the problem. After the company received tons of complaints from Monroeville residents, roughly half an hour later, someone from the company tried to locate the issue and restore service. But by that point, it was way too late. The fans had already missed a good chunk of the game. As if Time Warner's reputation in Monroeville couldn't sink any lower than it already was, here came this controversy to make things a million times worse. And what's crazy is that this was not even the last broadcasting controversy involving the Pittsburgh Steelers at the 1995-96 playoffs. If I had a nickel for every time there was a broadcasting controversy during the playoffs involving the Steelers, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Because after the Steelers beat the Colts in the game between these teams behind me right here, the Steelers advanced to this game, Super Bowl 30, where they played the Dallas Cowboys. And quite infamously, there was a controversy outside of a Sun Devil Stadium, where there was a watch party being held, where fans could gather outside the stadium to watch the game on TV, only for the watch party to be shut down due to security reasons. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. If you are a Monroeville resident, and then you travel down to Tempe to watch the game outside on the stadium, my condolences. This was not your lucky month at all. If there's one thing we know about NFL fans, it's this much. Do not mess with their ability to watch their favorite team play. Do not interfere with their favorite team, especially if it's a big game, and especially if it's a playoff game. If the signal goes out in the middle of the biggest game in quite some time, and for younger fans, the biggest game they've ever seen their team play in their lives up until this point, you're going to get a bunch of irate customers, especially when your reputation is already in the gutter as it is. Some people will want to blow up your office. Because on this January day in 1996, Monroeville residents told Time Warner Cable that they were running on borrowed time. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.